know. Now, no more. That's why we keep on talk about the absolute truth, the ultimate truth, but no one can change what is the moment of birth, and then on and on and on, each moment unexpectedly arising and falling away until the end of life. What is that? No one. It's the end of the reality which arises and falls away until it ends the personality, which sees and hears as it's me or I. But actually, there's no I and no me, even at moment of birth.
Yeah. Thank you, Ajahn.
Each moment is exactly the same.
Yeah.
Without conditions, nothing can arise. It's conditioned to arise, only to arise. As soon as it has arisen, it falls away. No condition to make it fall. But what arises by conditions, finish the function of condition, so it's gone, falling away, never to arise again at all in samsara.
Yeah.
That's the truth. Just learn to understand what is there. So many realities from moment to moment not known because the rapidity of the arising and falling away so very rapidly. Just close of the eyes, nothing appear as that which can be seen. As soon as one opens one's eye, it's there many object that we take it for chair and people and book and so on. How fast it is. That's why it's just the miracle, playing the tricks, the magician. See, just make that which is nothing to be something.
Yeah, thank you, Ajahn.
Just learn to understand the truth from one reality at a time, because there are so many realities, but they can be categorized into the way it is, that which arises and experience an object, no matter what, it can experience the object. It just arises to experience the object by different conditions, so different characteristic and different function. Attachment is different from ignorance, different from anger. See, only one reality, one kind of a reality arising and falling away. Seeing arise to see no matter when, but not the same single one at all. And this is life, not permanent, so it depends on before the life ends. What about? How come from moment of birth up to the end, wholesomeness or unwholesomeness, see? Pleasant or unpleasant. But it has to be conditioned by the accumulation of one personality long time ago. And we use the word personality because it's different from the other khanda reality, which is conditioned to arise. Continue on. Different ones, different people, different moments, different reality, see? So we learn to understand what is there as it is. And right understanding works its way. No one there at all. But when it's not right understanding, ignorance works its way, attached to that which is not there anymore, but that is attachment to the other object appearing on and on and on. And this is life. That's why we don't have to fight to look for any reality rather than what is there already now. Before it's known, there's no understanding of its truth, that it's not there anymore. But now it's known, it's not there. Different ones at different moments, unknown yet, until right understanding develops to understand each different one closer and closer, to understand the nature, the nimitta, the sign of one reality at a time, that it's not like the other reality Seeing now is seeing, and hearing is not seeing. How come? Not together.
Yeah.
There must be only one reality appearing at a time. It appears, it's there only when it appears. What about when it does not appear? Who knows it? It's gone forever.
Mm-hmm.
Just a moment ago. What we take for a person is not permanent at all. It is composed with many, many rupas.
Mm-hmm.
And there are also different namas, not the rupa, arising by conditions, different conditions.
Mm-hmm.
Just in a moment, only one moment and then gone. But they are quite different. The rupa, the reality which arises and is hard, soft, taste, sound, cannot experience anything. But it does not belong to anyone. It's not my voice at all. Without the hardness, softness, the Mahaputta Rupa, can there be any sound, any voice? Impossible. But when we just do this, hardness strikes, it conditions sound. And where sound, it does not arise alone. It needs the for Mahaputta Rupa, primary Rupas. That's why we learn about the truth which is hidden.
Okay, thank you.
Time and time, long time ago, uncountable time.
Thank you, Ajahn.
Beyond expectation, everything.
Yeah.
But it's so true. Just be
Yeah.
truthful to the truth. That's all. And that is parami. Only that can lead to more patience, more viriya effort, reading, considering, thinking about what is there gradually, little by little, until right understanding develops enough to let go by itself, not by anyone. No matter what we get, pleasant, unpleasant, it's by conditions and then gone.
Yeah. Thank you, Ajahn.
We might think that we have lots of money in the bank or somewhere, but when it's not used, where is it? Only at moment of thinking.
Yeah.
So it's real life, real reality, real moment. But ignorance cannot understand that because no word from the enlightened one to condition moment of considering the truth of what is there now. That's why I keep on listening, considering, understanding, on and on by conditions until time comes. What is there now appears well, beginning to appear well, because now when they are together, not anyone can appear well because they are together, right? Seeing and hearing and thinking and gone instantly. That's why learn to understand the truth of what we heard about the truth, to consider whether it's true or not. And that is right understanding, which can understand what is right and what is not right. It's false, it's wrong. Life is not permanent, and life cannot be anyone at all. It is moment of seeing. A reality is conditioned just to see only. Seeing cannot do anything. It just sees. So it's a reality which sees. No dog, no cat, no boy, no girl, no one. The seeing is conditioned just to arrive to see and then gone. Just consider whether it's true or not. And when it's true, according to its truth, it's right understanding of the truth. Nothing is permanent, but the idea of someone is permanent because not understanding the truth of that which is not permanent at all right now.
Yeah.
Mm.
Thank
So
you,
we
Ajahn.
can learn about whatever is there, because Buddha explained for 45 years to condition moment of understanding the truth. So ignorance will letting go little by little.
Thank you, Ajahn.
Yes, anytime they are all Dhammas, whatever is there now, we can talk about it. And it's a true Dhamma, not in the book. See, it's not in the book, it's right now. And we just talk a moment of seeing only, a moment of hearing, a moment of thinking, a moment of liking, a moment of disliking. See, whatever is true can be learned because it's there, but no understanding yet. So we learn about its truth. So there can be the understanding of its nature as it is. No one. No. So we can talk about anything to understand what is there. And it's there now, no matter we talk about any cetasika or citta, it's right now. Not far away at all, so close. The closest reality is there.
Yeah, we don't see the reality. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's true.
But when we consider and have understanding, it is there. So when we hear again, it's there, understanding what we have heard. A little more, a little more, a little more.
Yeah, true. Sometimes I consider, and I was within this consideration, there comes this reality that, oh, such an amazing discovery, and you start considering again.
Mm-hmm. And there are attachment to the idea. I think that you have learned about the 5 khandhas.
Yeah.
So all the khandhas are objects of attachment and ignorance.
Yeah.
Because there is not yet the understanding of memory, as not I who remember now. Feeling is there, but it does not appear as the object. So it's not yet feeling, it's just feeling, arising and falling away. Everything. Not enough until what appears now appears well. And it can appear well only to right understanding.
Yeah.
And this is moment of developing right understanding to enlighten the truth, the Four Noble Truths.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ajahn.
So we can talk about anything, the truth of it, much more to learn, to let go the idea of self, little by little. Because this is only intellectual understanding about the truth, but it's not directly aware and understand the seeing, the characteristic, the nature of it, which arises and see. To get closer to understand what it's meant by nama, the reality which arises and experiences an object. Just alone, right understanding can understand the seeing, the citta, not the cetasika or other reality. Otherwise, it's not clear to really understand that which experiences an object right now. Always hidden, covered up, wrapped up by ignorance and covered up by attachment to whatever is there.
Thank you, Ajahn. Okay.
Sita, one question. Can you or I or anyone ever see reality? Or can you or I ever understand reality?
There is seeing, but there is no seer who sees.
But when you mentioned earlier that we don't see the reality, what do you mean we don't see the reality?
You don't see the reality. You are aware sometimes, unknowingly. Sometimes you are aware of it, but then you have to remind yourself again and again. That is
what is aware? What is awareness and what is aware?
Yeah, when there's no I, there's no nama and rupa, and that is the reality. And then you start understanding, and then sometimes
okay, just
again,
pause a moment. What do you mean when there's no nama or rupa? What does this mean? Like now, is there nama? Is there nama now?
Yeah, there's always nama and rupa.
Right. If there's understanding, is there nama and rupa also?
Yeah, there is always nama and rupa, and it's always there. It falls and it rises and it falls, and that is it's always there.
So what about hearing now, for example? It's a reality, it's a nama which experiences. Can anyone be aware of hearing? No. Why not?
There is sound.
What about if we're talking about hearing? Can anyone be aware of hearing?
There is what do I say? You hear the sound, but it's like the hearing and seeing is the same. There's no seeing, there's no hearing, you hear the sound.
At a moment of hearing, is there any seeing?
No.
No. At a moment of hearing, no seeing, different reality which experiences the sound. Is there any you or I that hears?
No.
No. It's just the hearing which hears the sound. And if there is awareness of hearing or awareness of sound, is it you or I that is aware?
No.
Why not? Why not?
Because there's only sound and there's seeing. When the seeing is already...
No seeing. We're talking about, okay, sound. Hearing. So it's a moment of awareness of hearing, all right? It's a moment of awareness of hearing. Is it you or I that is aware of hearing?
No.
What is aware of hearing?
That's only the sound.
No, we're talking about the reality of hearing. If the reality of hearing, the nama, appears and is the object of awareness.
Yeah.
Who or what is aware of that hearing?
It's not I who is aware of that hearing. Its sound is there. Am I correct?
No. At that moment when the reality of hearing appears is the object of understanding, the object of awareness. It's the awareness itself which is aware of hearing. It's the understanding itself which understands the hearing. No sound at that moment. It's just the reality of hearing. It's not you or I or anyone that hears. It's not you or I or anyone that sees. It's not you or I or anyone that is aware of hearing or seeing. Because several times you mentioned, oh, we don't see the reality, or we are not aware. But it's never we that is aware. It's never we that see the reality. It's awareness itself which is aware. No I to do anything at all. And this is the main point that Ajahn was stressing. We learn about these different realities to begin to understand no I to be found, no I that experiences, no I that is experienced, just different namas, different moments of seeing, hearing, thinking with ignorance, thinking with attachment, thinking with awareness, and just the realities which are experienced like sound, visible object, or an idea of someone at a moment of thinking. But in truth, no I to experience anything at all.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Sarah.
Sawadika, Ajahn, and good to see you in your chair. And hello, everyone. Nina, do you have anything you would like to discuss?
Yeah, Ayurveda, because last time we discussed it and you wrote very well about it, and Ajahn explained that seeing now is result of karma and hearing now, but it is a difficult subject. I feel I don't have enough understanding yet that it is the collection of karma in this life, because there are many karmas which bring result. But seeing now, I understand, is the result of a karma in this life, but I don't know whether I understand rightly Ayurveda.
Why do you say it's the result of karma in this life?
There are many karmas in former lives, so yes. It could also be a result of a karma in former life, but we don't know.
So usually it's the karma from previous lives, any karma from any time in the past.
Yeah.
For example, the karma that conditioned the birth consciousness, but not just one karma is there at birth. Many, many different karmas have been accumulated, collected together at that moment of birth that can bring results during this lifetime, like moments of seeing pleasant object, moments of seeing unpleasant object, different karmas bringing their results at different times during life. But I'm sure Ajahn can add more to your points.
And it's not quite clear why Ayurveda, what is exactly Ayurveda?
What about just understand what is there now in order to understand the word used in the Tipitaka? For example, forget about the word Ayurveda.
Yes.
Just what is there from birth. That's why even we understand the characteristic of the reality which arises and experience an object, but so many different ones. For example, seeing experiences object, visible object that which you see now, and hearing, another moment, another condition, another object, another reality which arises to hear it, right? That's why whatever is there so very short and so very different. We born to be different being, right? Snake, fish, monkey, human being, male and female, see, without condition for whatever arises, can there be such different reality? And after birth, what about later, after birth, then later moment, seeing so many different objects is seen. Why not the same? Some is pleasant and some is unpleasant. The Dhamma, which condition the birth of human being, must be the wholesome karma, kusala karma, right? It's time for that one karma, only one particular karma, condition birth moment, right? Only one karma. So what should happen in that life should be just the pleasant object to be experienced, because it's the result of wholesome condition, wholesome cause. But while sometimes there's pain and sometimes there's unpleasant object experienced, so there must be other karma besides the one which condition birth moment. So for that life, all karmas in samsara accumulated in order to condition a moment when time comes properly for that very karma to produce result, not just the karma that condition birth consciousness, right?
Yes.
And that is meant by ayuhana, the collection of the karmas which can produce results in that life. For example, what about the very, very wholesome kusala has been done before in some life, but it cannot produce results as the pleasant object as in heaven in this life yet. So it's just the pleasant object of the human world. And for snake, what about its wholesome karmas? Much more wholesome than any karma, but it's not yet time to produce result, to condition moment of seeing or hearing as the vipaka of a snake. So the moment of birth is conditioned by a karma to condition such personality or the being to be. But the other karmas accumulated to produce result only in that life. That's why that is the meaning of ayuhana, not just one karma condition the life, but there are also other karmas which can produce or condition its result when it's time, when time comes. And no one knows what karma condition what moment of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching at all. Because the karma itself is hidden. It doesn't show up. It's I who conditions such and such vipaka. And the vipaka is also hidden, because at this moment of seeing, who knows that it's conditioned by what life karma? Who knows? Maybe last life or years and years life before. All dhammas are hidden. It cannot be known at all because so uncountable karmas, and who knows this life can collect what kind, what level of karma to condition what is there as vipaka in this life. As much as we know is that the pleasant karma, the kusala vipaka, conditioned by kusala karma, and akusala vipaka, conditioned by akusala karma. That's all. and ayuhana, even the karma, which is much more wholesome than this life, does not have condition yet to condition the result in this life. Who knows? But in heaven, say, the karma which has been accumulated, ayuhana, condition what that can be conditioned karma in that plane by conditions. Can we have the divine food like the deva in this life? Impossible. But when we are in heaven, do we have such food like we have in this life? Impossible. And that's the meaning of ayuhana. According to conditions, that's all. Not only one karma in one's life, other karmas too. Who knows? Because only what is there now arises and falls away, never to arise again. But there are conditions for whatever arises on and on and on and on, non-stop, until the enlightenment of the noble truth, conditioned birth of not as much as when it's the conditioned life on and on with ignorance. So ayuhana karma, different from my ayuhana karma, right?
All karmas are different, yes.
Mm-hmm.
No, but also the ayuhana for the one we call Suchin is different from the one we call Nina, because at birth, at the moment of Patisandhi, the karmas that have been accumulated and are gathered, collected at that moment of Patisandhi are different in each case, different for the deva than the snake, different for Jonathan than for me, as to what results can be conditioned during this life as vipaka, or depending on the different ayuhana at birth as to what karmas can bring what results during this life.
Yes, yes.
Like some people have a lot of disability or bad eyesight, and others have a lot of pleasant bodily feeling, all conditioned by past karma, depending on the ayuhana at birth.
Yes.
It's helpful because it explains all the great differences in results during life, all by conditions, all by the different karmas that have been accumulated. And as Ajahn stressed, many karmas from the past cannot bring results in this life because no conditions for them, but those that can bring different results accordingly. It just shows how what appears now, the seeing now, is conditioned by different karmas. Each seeing is different for each person, different moments of seeing different objects, results of kusala and akusala karma.
Is it pity to understand this?
Yeah, it has to match really the kind of birth one has.
By
Like,
conditions.
Yeah.
A little more, begin again to be more, a little more understanding.
I think it's very joyful to appreciate how intricate the conditions are, the karmas are, to bring the results just as it is, No one can change it. No one can make it anything anyway different. Nothing to be done at all. No one to see, no one to hear, no one to be aware, no one to try to have a different result now, all conditioned by karma and other conditions. So nothing to be done at all. No need to think about I can be aware, or I can see, or I can hear. Sita, just different dharmas arising by their conditions.
Yes. But when someone is so impolite all the time, when it is only a few times, one can bear it. But when it is again and again, and then one would like to change thinking about it all the time. But it is impossible. I realize that it is all by conditions. We like to change it, not to think about it so much, but we still do. But then it's the time to understand that moment.
And that is not studying Dhamma. It's not learning to understand Dhamma, because it's the wishing, wanting to change.
To change, yeah.
At that moment, it can be understood because it's there. But without considering, it's impossible to understand any word we have learned, that it's there already. Attachment is there, unknown. But it can be known when we talk about it, to understand the moment of lopa, attached. It is attached to everything appearing. That's why we learn to understand the difference between right understanding, quite different, opposite of lopa, attachment, because it understands the truth that it's not there anymore. How can it attach to?
I'm thinking of the Bodhisattva, because the Bodhisattva was insulted and said that is good, because then he has opportunity to develop more kusala or understanding. Let them insult me again and again.
And are we not Bodhisattva?
No.
Savaka Bodhisattva. Three kinds of Bodhisattva.
Yeah, that you explained that, yeah. We are still learning.
And I think it's just for a moment, Ajahn, because at moments of trying to change the situation or trying to stop the thinking or trying not to be annoyed, then at those moments of the wrong path, no Savaka Bodhisattva at those moments. So I think it's just when there is right understanding, when it is the right path. So different moments. And
so
because
when we read about that, so we should not forget that it is right understanding. It's not trying not to think so much or worry so much.
And it's very stressful and troublesome, all that trying to change the thinking, trying not to have dosa, trying not to cling, trying not to have wrong practice, trying to be aware. It's causes a lot of problems, the opposite of piti, because it's very disturbing, causing more and more difficulty in life.
Yes. Yes, like you said, it's the clinging to the self, which is the cause of all the troubles in life.
the clinging to being able to control or change or develop goodness, it's very deep-rooted.
But then it's the time to consider those moments of trying not to worry, but that's not thinking. It's different from thinking about reality. And that is sometimes difficult to understand the difference, that it is considering and not thinking.
Well, considering is thinking, but there can be wise and unwise considering, wise and unwise thinking. There can be thinking about how there shouldn't be the trying to control, but that can be with lobha too, more clinging, more ignorance. So it depends on the very moment if there is any understanding. And actually the understanding has to develop to understand directly the moments of wrong understanding, the moments of the wrong idea that I can control. Otherwise, it's just thinking endlessly. So it has to come back to understanding that reality itself when it appears, even in the midst of that kind of thinking.
Yes.
So even when thinking about, oh, I shouldn't think like this, even at those times, there can be understanding in between, that it's just the clinging and the wrong understanding at those moments. We always think the problem is like an example you gave, when someone is being rude, we think it's the person being rude that's the problem, but actually they are just moments of vipaka, hearing sound, and the real problem is the thinking and obsession about it and clinging to the story and the aversion and the idea of I and the idea of the other person.
Right, yes. Thank you. But it's good. It's good to hear about it, all this. Very helpful.
To Dow or Alan, do you have any topic you'd like to bring up today?
Sarah, I heard on a few months back that when there is anger, it's the test of parami, whether parami is there or not. Maybe you could explain a bit more like around that. So when there's anger, it's the test of parami. Ajahn said it.
Okay.
Can't hear you, Sarah.
I think any moment, any reality is the test of understanding in the parami, like Nina's example, when hearing, when someone is rude, it's the test then. Is there any understanding of the reality appearing, or is one lost in the story about the other person? And the same when there's anger. Is there any understanding that it's just a Dhamma, not my anger? But let's let Ajahn say more.
Not only moment of anger, any moment. What about attachment? It's attached too.
Mm-hmm. I think that there was a sutta that I read by Sundara about the parable of the saw, that when we are abused or when somebody's rude to us, that is the real test of whether we are kind or not. So if how we respond to that kind of situation, it's the sort of test of whether we really are kind or not, because it's easy to be kind to when people speak kindly to us. So in that situation, when somebody is rude to us, it's more difficult to be kind. So does it show up the need for parami, maybe? Or I guess it's not any different from attachment, really, is it? Whatever reality is there.
John Cup, if I can just say something here. Alan, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, I didn't realize you were here, but yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, you're referring to the Kakatupam Sutta. That the Buddha spoke to Pagguna, and the Buddha, and the Jan's comment was very relevant, about attachment, because he was, in that sutta, you'll probably remember when the Buddha said there was once in this town of Sawati, the woman Kali and Wadehika, or some name like that. I think it was Wadehika. And she was a householder, and everything was going quite smoothly. But Kali, who worked for her, or was the housekeeper, said, I'm going to test this woman and see if she's really as calm as she seems to be. And obviously what she was doing there, and Ajahn kind of brought that out, is that, everything's going nice and smoothly. And there's a lot of attachment, obviously, when people are doing what you want them to do. And we don't see that as attachment. We just see that as, that's good, that's likable. And that's what should be done. But we don't realize how much attachment is involved, because we also realize that we can know that it's because of our attachment that there is aversion. And so, as we know, and as the sutta went, it goes on and talks about many different aspects of kusala and many different ways that kusala can be performed. But you can use that word test. I don't know if that word explicitly is used there. I can't remember it as such. However, what is being spoken to is when people speak unkindly to you, we can say at those moments, is there understanding, or is there moments of metta, or is there moments of aversion? And yes, for the unenlightened person, there'll be a lot of aversion, but still there can be moments of patience, which is a level of kusala, obviously. If it's kusala virya, sometimes, of course, there can be a kusala patience too. We can just stand back there and listen to that person abusing us, and we can have a lot of aversion, but we don't show it. And that's understandable, because that's what's conditioned to arise at that particular moment. But I think how I take that sutta, I think it's, the Buddha is saying very explicitly, do not think that when you have a moments of aversion, you are practicing my teachings. You are not. So it's a reminder, like when we gather today and listen to Tanajan and others, it can be reminders about the nature of Dhamma as it really is, and ideally not to be neglectful about the realities that appear. But on a broader sense, he doesn't always explicitly, and as in that sutta, speak about Dhamma in the broader sense, but it's there, you could say, as an underlying message that because, you know, I think that housekeeper, Kali, who was testing Wadehika, was trying to, and she went out in the street eventually because I think Wadehika smacked her on the head with the doorknob, and she ran around the streets with all the blood running down her head, saying, "Look how nasty that woman is." And of course, that's just more akusala, and what she was doing by testing her was obviously a lot of akusala involved in that too. But the Buddha was pointing out to her that most people, I think, and we can see from that sutta, most people just have a lot of attachment in life, and they're not aware of that just because things are going their way. But when they don't go your way, then you can say that is the test of Dhamma, if you like. You can use that way, but we know what was really being said there. So, and the teachings do ask of us to dig deep at many different levels, depending on the circumstances. So, you know, and that sutta is very powerful because, you know, as you know, it's called the Kakachu Upama Sutta. Kakachu is upama is the same in Thai. Upama is just a simile. So kakachu is a saw. So if somebody was to grab you and for no reason at all start to saw you from limb, it's a very it's a very difficult thing, of course. But if you would have any moment of dosa, any moment of aversion, you would not be practicing the Dhamma, and do not think that you can justify it. And I brought that sutta up because I think it was one of Vincent's friends, Dal John or something like that. He was concerned about, he was talking, is it okay to have, I can't remember exact questions, but he brought up the aspect of violence, and violence at any level, you know, even because violence, hingsaka or ahingsaka, is not ever okay to be violent, you know, to have aversion, even at a subtle level. That's the ideal. We are working towards that point when we realize how dangerous attachment is, and that's why I think it was very appropriate that Tanajan brought up this aspect of attachment, because mostly unknowingly, most of our life is just sliding by with so much attachment, which is a condition for aversion. So that's what he was saying. And then, of course, if there's no understanding, there'll be more and more conditions for aversion and more conditions for us to react violently, even violently, when the situation arises. And as we know, the Bodhisattva over millions and millions of lifetimes develop very deep levels of you mentioned the parami, the perfection, so that even in the case, there's another very powerful Jataka story, which is related to when Devadatta abused the Buddha, and you know, he did horrible things to the Buddha, but the Buddha did not have any aversion towards him, even though he cut off his ear and cut off his nose and cut off his legs. You know, the Buddha in a past life, because he'd accumulated patience, it was called the Kantiwada Jataka. You know, he called himself the practice of patience. So it manifests in all sorts of ways through the teachings. These different, like the Kakachupa Sutta, when someone grabs you and starts to saw you limb from limb. So the Buddha, by way of that sutta, is reminding us that, you know, as Ajahn pointed out, that attachment is the problem ultimately. We know that's because that is the first noble truth, dukkha samudaya, dukkha arya satya, and then which is the first noble truth. And this first noble truth is caused by dukkha samudaya, which is the arising of dukkha, which is tanha, which is another name for lobha. So suffering at any level is bound up with lobha or tanha, doesn't matter really what we call it. It has many different names in the suttas, karma raga, etc., etc., etc. There are lots of different names. So he's reminding us that the development of understanding at any level, and we get together, as I said, as friends, to listen to the Dhamma, to be reminded about ultimately the dangers of attachment, because, you know, even if we're treated horribly, most horribly, any type of anger that arises is because of attachment. It's not easy to hear sometimes, but it's true.
Yeah, well said. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think that I take it as it's a very powerful reminder that we're not following the teachings if we think badly of somebody who is rude to us or we react to it. We're off track. But as you say, it is through listening and considering a lot that there are conditions to be patient at that time. So that's kind of like what I suppose I understand by the word test, that is it sufficient? Is it there, that patience, that ability to not react because we have learned and considered in the past? So
that's right.
Yeah, it's a very powerful sutta.
Oh, it is. I'm sorry, keep going.
Yeah, because he takes the extreme there, being even if you're sawn, you have your limbs sawn off, you shouldn't be angry. But we get angry over much smaller things.
Oh, yes. Yes, oh, indeed we do. Yes, indeed we do.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very powerful sutta to just bring us back to the reality of the present moment. Because if there is no awareness now, in a situation like that, it can get out of control very quickly.
Totally. And as Ajahn pointed out there, that understanding, at moments of understanding, there's no attachment. So there's no conditions for dosa there, no conditions. And even if we were grabbed at those moments, and there's some moments of understanding, and we realized, or if they started to saw you, then there would still not be any aversion. It's a tough call, and we hope it never happens, but sometimes in life it does. And people treat us horribly, speak to us horribly. We know that's the part of the Intl.Dhamma, the 8 worldly conditions. There are conditions for, happiness, unhappiness, praise and dispraise, so on, sukha and dukkha. And, that's an aspect of dukkha, when people grab you and do horrible things to you. And that's part of life, unfortunately. That's just the nature of samsara. It'll go on like that from life to life to life to life, when we're treating horribly or pleasantly. And of course, we can realize that when there is moments, and mostly, of course, like Ajahn, I think it's always important to be reminded, because of the attachment, that there is aversion. And that's what we're here for, to by way of Dhamma, to develop the understanding that enables less conditions for attachment, and to begin to recognize it as attachment, because many people conflate and confuse, like a lot of people here talk about, with love, love, which, as we know in English, it's just the Pali word lobha. Lobha and love, exactly the same etymology, exactly the same family of words. So that often people say, they conflate love and liking. Liking is another etymological connection with lobha. All these words relate to attachment, which cause problems. It doesn't mean to say we should stop, lobha, because you can't. It just arises by conditions. This is the nature of life. But the aim of the Dhamma is to enable more understanding of lobha as it really is. It'll arise. That's why we were born. We were born, if there wasn't any lobha, you wouldn't be born. So that's part of the deal, in the sense that you're born because of attachment. You'd like to go on seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, because you see the advantages of those, but really there's no advantages in them, and that's not easy to take on board or to begin to understand.
And the point of the test, Alan, is that it's now. It's always now, like now. If there's no thinking about the person being rude, or the sore, or the killing, or the problems in the world, then where are they? So the reality is the thinking now, the clinging now, the ignorance now. So the test is always of the understanding at this very moment, because in truth there is no this person or that person, or no killing, or no anyone, anything at this moment. There's just thinking, clinging, ignorance, seeing, hearing. So the test has to be of what appears at this very moment. So we live in the world of concepts all the time.
The param is developed by conditions. No one can have patience at will. So it is through understanding the teachings or understanding reality.
With understanding. So it's the test of the understanding, and all the param is the truthfulness, the virya, the adhitthana, the metta at this very moment.
And they develop they are conditioned themselves by the understanding of
by the right understanding.
Dhamma. Yes.
Without understanding, metta cannot develop. With right understanding, right virya cannot develop. It would be taken for someone doing something all the time, and they'll be thinking of this and that different situation all the time, moving further and further away from the truth at this very moment. Like now, there's no thought of killing, and no one is being rude to one. So it's just thinking about a story, but what about the test right now, at this moment of seeing, this moment of hearing, this moment of boredom, this moment of kindness? The test is now.
And there are many different, Ellen, I mean, I think there are so many different examples in the suttas. You know, I think of Angulimala. He was people threw rocks and stones at him, and he was bleeding one day. It's probably a good example too. He was badly, because he had done some horrible things in his earlier life. He had killed many, many people, and then he became a bhikkhu. And people were many people were probably quietly disgusted that he could get away with his crimes just by becoming a bhikkhu. But the Buddha saw him coming back with bloodied robes and bloodied face and arms and limbs. And he said to him, Adivasehi Brahmana, which means literally live the higher life. Live the higher life. So he was reminding him then, and he called him Brahmana. What a true meaning of a Brahmana is to develop that high level of understanding that is necessary. Well, at that stage, I'm not sure whether he had become Arahata, but he was reminding him, whether he was Arahata or not, it's not really so important, to develop, to live the higher life, not the low life. And the low life is having aversion. And also, we've touched on this by way of the Sadala Sutta, not to have those double arrows like of physical pain, which even Arahatas experience, but Arahatas don't have the double arrow of then having aversion as well. So you're shooting yourself twice. You've been shot by the pain, and we can say that to do also with the Kakachupam Sutta, or so many other suttas which are kind of similar, but perhaps not so quite graphic, that no need to shoot yourself twice by having aversion. So you're creating a bigger problem for yourself. And that's the same with physical pain. Sometimes the problem is not so much the physical pain, but all the aversion and the poor me that we feed into the equation. So we create a double problem, or more than a double problem sometimes, by aggravating the wound, so to speak, of the physical pain. And that's the nature of life. And the Dhamma helps us by degrees, little by little, to have more understanding and more detachment. But that doesn't come easily. It comes with a real commitment to truth. And that's what the paramis come down to. They're commitments to truth at any different level. And there are many different levels, of course, but it does take time. And as we know, it takes great patience and commitment. You could say adhitthana is a type of commitment to Dhamma.
Thank you. I suppose we could say that some people need a jolt in order to perhaps consider Buddhism. If you're losing your loved ones, it's a kind of wake-up call, but not necessarily.
Well, it's always going to depend upon the individual. You know, like I think of that's in the suttas also, where that woman had lost, you know, her distraught. She was horribly distraught, She'd lost her son and her partner and another, I think she lost 2 children, and she was virtually distraught, horribly distraught, weeping. She was virtually naked running through the streets because she was in a state of shock and incredible depression because of what had happened to her. And the Buddha, by degrees, reminded her, this is life. You know, Ewa Mewa, he said to her, you know, go to any house and bring me back 7 sesame seeds of a house that has not known death. And she could not find anybody who could give her the sesame seeds, as well as not being able to, as well as from a house that has not known death. No, we can give you the sesame seeds, but we can't give you the fact that we have not known death. We have. And by degrees, she was able to realize that death is inevitable. It's an inevitable consequence of life. Visakha came to the Buddha with the same thing. She was weeping and crying, and the Buddha said to her, Visakha, how many people die in this great city of Savatthi every day? Oh, actually, before that time, he said to her, Visakha, if I could give to you as many granddaughters as are in this great city of Savatthi, would you like that? That her granddaughter had died. And she says, oh, yes, I would like that, Lord. But how many people die in this great city of Savatthi? Oh, well, dozens, hundreds, possibly. So you would want time for crying if I was to give you and replace all those. If I was to replace your granddaughter, if I could replace your granddaughter. But there are people dying all the time that will, because of our attachment, that breeds sorrow. And she was able to see that, oh, it's ridiculous crying over something because that's all about my attachment to my granddaughter who has died. What's the point of that? There really is no point, but it doesn't stop her. She was a Sotapanna. So there are all these reminders in the suttas about pain and difficulty and sorrow that's endemic in the nature of existence. It cannot be avoided. We cannot go past that. We are born, and therefore we'll have unpleasant experiences during our life, and we will die. And in between time, we'll mostly, talked about the common person, we'll just accumulate more and more and more attachment, which is a condition for more and more sorrow. And with the Dhamma, we're able to understand that there can be less and less conditions for attachment. That's the aim of it. It's difficult because human beings, or men, women, doesn't matter what word you use, our natural proclivity is towards liking. And the Buddha called it sukha kamani bhutani. We're all pleasure-seeking creatures. That's what humans are. We desire pleasant experiences. We almost demand them sometimes. We don't get them. We become unhappy. But that's not the deal of life. In reality, it doesn't work like that. If you have attachment, even if you are, as the Buddha called sukha kamani bhutani, you're a pleasure-seeking creature, it'll bring sorrow at some level or another eventually. If there's not any understanding that's developed, and the Buddha enabled that understanding through all the thousands and tens of thousands and millions upon millions of dewas that he spoke to, that this has to be understood. And if it's not understood, it will cause more and more and more sorrow.
Yeah, well said.
I think the purpose is to understand that actually there's no one here, no one there. In truth, no Angulimala, no maid. If there's no thinking, where is the situation, the world, the people we think of as so important? So now there can be understanding that it's just thinking, and usually what kind of thinking is it? Thinking of attachment, thinking of aversion. So even if someone has the shock you mentioned, Alan, it's still the shock of my family member that's passed away, or I that have had this experience or that. If there's no understanding of reality, of Dhamma as Dhamma now, as anatta, then it's not the Buddha's teaching at all, because only the understanding of Dhammas appearing now as Dhammas can lead to the path that leads out of samsara. No matter how many stories we think about, no matter how many shocks, it cannot bring the understanding any closer. It cannot be the passing of the test at this moment. But perhaps Ajahn would like to add more to your points too.
Alan, could you just remind us of your original question, please?
The original, my second question was that for some people, they need a jolt of unhappiness, maybe through losing their loved one or losing health or something like that, in order to be turned towards being interested in Buddhism. But I think that's just for some people. I think we all come across, we're all interested in Buddhism for different reasons. So I suppose the question comes down to what motivates us to be interested in Buddhism?
I think it's an interesting question. But in my experience, those people who show an interest because of a grieving, a trauma, usually turn out not to be genuinely interested in the Dhamma, but more interested in resolving their grief or their particular issue. But that's just the way it happens. It's not to say that there aren't some who do become genuinely interested in the Dhamma, but mostly they see the Dhamma as a means of relieving their unhappiness. But the people often ask one, well, how did you become interested in Dhamma? And of course, everyone's got their story, but the real answer is just of the previously accumulated understanding and interest, which is a condition for the interest to manifest in this life when the appropriate conditions are there. And sometimes those conditions, in conventional terms, do involve a jolt of some kind. One is happily living a frivolous life, and then there's a jolt, and there are conditions to consider things more deeply and to appreciate the value of the Dhamma. But it's always the accumulated interest from the past that is the real condition, and the result of coming into contact with the Dhamma. Because many people may have that accumulated interest, but they don't have the opportunity to hear the Dhamma appropriately explained in this lifetime.
I think Jonathan has raised an interesting point there too, Alan, because with the Buddha in his last life, when he saw those, they called them chatunamitta, those four images, of the sick man, the dying, the sick man, and the dead man, and the diseased man, and then the bhikkhu. That was a jolt for him, to remind him that this is the nature of life. But I think, as Jonathan has alluded to in some measure, that for some people, always get a jolt and that's all it is. It really starts and stops there. Yes, they're upset, but not the conditions. But there are many examples within the suttas where those jolts were conditions, as Jonathan has alluded to in some measure. That sorrow precipitated them to go and see the Buddha. He was called he was the savior in that ultimate sense. He points people to the causes of dukkha, of suffering at any different level, at the deepest level, which is our attachment to the different dhammas that appear. And if no understanding is developed of those, quite contrary to what they may think, because often, as I said, people conflate and confuse love. They think, well, love's a good thing, attachment's a good thing. But that's what many folk think. But its understanding enables us gradually to tease apart these different dhammas, to realize that most of it is mostly a kusala, and mostly attachment, sometimes quite subtle, but it's there lurking, as it always has been, but not known. And when the Buddha was enlightened, he said, house builder, I see you. It's tanha, your attachment. Very famous sutta in the Vinaya, I believe it is, when he says, I have spotted you, ditosi. The Pali is ditosi, you are seen, house builder, kahagarika, you are seen. And the house builder is attachment. That's what enables this, inverted commas, house to be built, this house of many different levels of attachment, that the world is created, inverted commas, because of attachment. And if that attachment is not learned about in the beginning, by way of pariyatti, by way of different levels of understanding, then will perpetuate the suffering. That's the only way out. Whether we've got, and so it's important to listen and consider carefully what we're here, and not just dismiss things like many people do and say, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with love," is there surely? So the Buddha said, yes, there is problems, and then they need to be addressed. Otherwise, if they're not addressed, there'll be more and more of them.
Actually, it was interesting what Jonathan was saying about that when people get a jolt, they just want to get over the pleasant feeling. Because I had that. There's somebody whose husband had left her, and she was quite distraught, and she was asking me all sorts of questions. But actually, what it boiled down to, she just wanted to be happy, not interested in. She was just interested in some sort of drug to make her happy, rather than being interested in Buddhism. And but I think that it was interesting also what Ajahn said about something similar, that actually she was better off probably without him, and didn't realize that she had lost a huge weight of responsibility. Somebody didn't like her, and that she was actually didn't realize that she was a lot better off in her new situation.
So we can see there's a lot more attachment. That's all. She's just accumulating a attachment to another type, which that's very obvious. In many ways, it's not a wise response to the loss of a loved one. It's a selfish one, and that can be spotted quite easily by anybody who listens to that. And I'm not saying she didn't have some moments of genuine grief and sorrow and appreciation for what that her husband was at times, but if she was to think, to sort of blot it out by that kind of attitude, well, that won't help her much in the long term. Anybody who's thinking carefully about life will see that. I mean, there's a friend of mine who says, seek what is meaningful, not that which is expedient. And usually we just lean towards, different levels of attachment, which represents expediency, which doesn't lead to anything really meaningful.
Yeah, and
so
I think
Alan,
also,
go on.
Oh, I was just thinking that when there is a lot of aversion, as in grief, then it's very difficult to consider the Dharma. And likewise, when there's a lot of attachment, it becomes very difficult to consider it. You just are not interested following attachments. So it's very, very difficult to be interested because of attachment and because of aversion in the Dharma. Because I think everybody is hindered, aren't they, by attachment? That's the reason why people aren't interested. They're just pursuing attachments, as in fact we all are, because we can't be interested all the time because we are dragged away by attachment all the time. Yeah, go on, Sakin.
Oh yeah, what you just said just gave me a point to consider. I was just going to generalize and say that it's regardless of the situation, as John was saying, the actual conditions are hearing the Dhamma and right consideration. So what you just described seemed to be an example of how when it's strong akusala, when it's strong akusala, then it's sometimes very hard. So yeah, but then generally again, it's not, as you were saying initially, that we need to have some difficulty in life to be a jolt or anything, but it's for all of us, isn't it, that things happen before we heard the Dhamma, but it's only after hearing the Dhamma and there was understanding, could we say that there's an interest in hearing more?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I would just add to that that I don't think strong levels of attachment or strong levels of aversion preclude understanding. They don't get in the way because they can be understood. They're different dhammas that can be understood, just like any other dhamma that arises. So they don't have to preclude understanding, like the case of the bhikkhu who committed suicide. He developed enough understanding, even when he was no doubt, going through that, or subsequent at the time and subsequent to it, when he was committing suicide. But he had understanding. His accumulated panya came to the fore. So even when there's really unpleasant things happening, like, of course, obviously when the Buddha was, or Angulimala, whoever, when horrible things happen, there is not that need to shoot yourself twice, so to speak. There can be understanding at those moments. So, and that, of course, will depend upon accumulated panya developed over thousands of lifetimes, no doubt.
Yes, yeah, I take your point. You can have a lot of attachment, but suddenly the next moment is unexpected. You may listen to the Dhamma.
Totally, and totally unexpected. That's the nature of Dhamma.
It's unpredictable. So
that's
no
right.
rule, really.
No, that's right. We can't say when it's going to arise, and we can't say the horrible attack or horrible aversion, or if you want to call horrible attachment, if you like. They don't preclude understanding. We have accumulated that over millions of lifetimes, so it will arise when there are the right conditions. But so can panya arise at the right time under the right conditions, and begin to understand that. And the more we can appreciate and understand that, the more conditions there will be for development understanding. If we say, oh, it can't be developed at that moment, then we know that's not really helpful and will not be a condition for the development of more and more understanding.
Yeah.
And even now, Alan, we think about the other people, the lack of interest, or about the shock situation, or about this story or that story. But even now, is there any understanding of what appears? Is there any interest in the reality now? Or is there more interest in this and that different scenario and what the other people think?
Yes.
So the interest, the understanding is just for a moment, even now. And it has to come back to this moment and what appears now.
So really,
Loba takes one along the different ideas, the different stories, or what about in this situation or that situation, or when someone has a shock or this or that. But what about now?
So we're really, we're only Buddhists for a split second. The rest of the time, we're dragged away by attachment.
And not we at all, like we were discussing with Sita. It's just a moment of understanding and then gone. That's all. And then attachment, ignorance, as usual, even now, even when thinking about this or that personal situation, it's just thinking of ignorance most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't got much time, so let's let Ajahn talk.
What is there now?
A reality, seeing.
Would you like anyone, your friend or people, to understand this moment?
Yes. I suppose it's my interest, therefore I like to share that interest with others.
Yes.
And it's very difficult.
Because what is there now is not known. So you'd like the other to be interested to understand this moment. What is there?
Yes, I see your point, that I don't, that it's not understood now. So it's the story of other people not understanding, but actually there's no understanding now. Yeah. And
can this be the test?
Yes, it's a good test, which I'm failing. Yeah, it's the test. it always comes back to what is now, whatever is now, and everything else is taking away from that moment, the story taking us away, or just taking away, not me away. Yeah.
When it's the thinking of the others and their understanding or lack of understanding, or why they're not interested in Buddhism and this and that, there's no understanding at all, because it's just a story about people and things and situations. So the understanding test always has to be now.
Yeah, it's a very good point.
And what citta is there at that moment? What kind of citta is there at that moment?
Unwholesome, rooted in ignorance and attachment.
And this can be the test too, to have less or to keep on having more.
Yes, yes. Yeah. Lots of tests.
Like thinking about what would I do if the robbers attacked me, or this or that happened. It's just thinking with attachment about different stories, different situations. It's not any understanding of the thinking now, the clinging now. So it always comes back to this moment.
I think it begins to show up the amount of accumulated unwholesomeness, which is not known really day to day, that it's just you get dragged away by attachment unknowingly. It's not known, like this story of why aren't they interested, and it's just a story conditioned by ignorance. Yeah.
Why do they teach this in the schools and this and that and that? It's just one story after another about this person or that person in the sutras or in the school or whatever. And as Ajahn pointed out, I think it was last week, the understanding of the details is not the real understanding of reality. The understanding of reality is now at the moment of thinking. What kind of thinking is it now? What kind of attachment, seeing, hearing? What is the reality at this very moment?
Mm-hmm.
Test is always now, now, now.
It's not you or anyone, but what is it?
A Dhamma, which is just a Dhamma.
A Dhamma is not clear because everything is a Dhamma.
So it needs to be one Dhamma.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
More precise. Otherwise, it's just in general about Dhamma.
Yes. Unless it's one Dharma, the truth of that Dharma cannot be known.
And even if one is not known now, can it be known?
Yes.
How
if it's not known now, well, the development has to be now, but it has to be developed now. And it can understand now because now it's true. Because of its truth.
So in the beginning, what can be known as it is?
In the beginning, there cannot be the precise understanding of one reality as it is, but it's the intellectual understanding that it is about understanding this moment. So that's the beginning. It's the intellectual understanding which begins to consider what this moment actually is, that it is some kind of reality, not different from thinking. Thinking is real, but it's different reality from sound, different reality from hearing. So the beginning is the intellectual understanding, and then that turns to odds, that conditions more understanding by direct experience. We understand, or the understanding is there that hardness is hardness. It's not my hand or my foot. So that makes sense intellectually, but also that reality begins to appear, but not clearly yet.
Yeah. So long story about realities, but what can be known in order to understand the truth, the reality as a self?
Yes, it has to be one reality as it is.
Yes. What is that?
Whatever is now, whatever
Yes.
reality is
What
now.
is that?
Now,
Yes. What is
hardness.
that?
Hardness.
Hardness. What about?
Sound.
Is hardness so very subtle?
Yes.
How
Because
and why? Why so subtle?
it's difficult to understand that reality as it is, as just hardness, no thing in it, no hand in it, no table in it.
So if someone thinks that it's not difficult at all to understand hardness, that is right or wrong?
It's wrong. It is difficult.
Mm-hmm. So now,
and it's, yeah.
So now hardness appears, right?
Yes.
What about the understanding of it?
So it's not clear, but it is there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not clear yet, but it is there.
And can there be only hardness at that very moment? Only hardness, or?
There, in theory, but if they're not, that is quite a high level of understanding that it's just hardness and not mixed in with any other reality.
Yes.
Because there is seeing now, hearing, touching, tasting, not just one.
Just the moment of hardness appearing. Is there only hardness?
Yes.
Really?
But that's where we're heading to. But that it doesn't appear as just hardness on its own, but on the other hand, because it's not at that level of understanding, but it is there. There's a difference between when there is hardness and when there is not hardness appearing, but not at the level that it's just hardness.
Even hardness is there. It's not known as it is because it's so very subtle. It arises and falls away instantly. And what else is there?
The reality which experiences it.
That's it. It's not known as it is.
No,
because
that's not known at all.
Mm-hmm.
I could see, it seems to me that hardness, that it's possible to have some understanding of hardness, but the reality which experiences it is just not ever show up.
That's why we just talk about all kinds of realities like hardness and whatever, but we forget about that which experiences it. For example, we talk about what is there? Hardness is there. But what else is there? The reality which experiences hardness. So no matter what we heard about so much, but no understanding of the characteristic which is there all the time from birth to death. The reality which experiences an object, should it be known in order to let go? Wrong understanding, taking it for I or someone.
That's essential to understand that reality. Otherwise, it will always be I or someone. Yeah.
So why do we learn about it? Why we study many different kinds of that which experience an object? Because it's the unknown, so very close. So without understanding that reality, which is the chief, very important, because without it, no will appear at all. Nothing can appear. but it's there all the time. We study a lot in order to learn what cannot be taken for people and things must be the reality which experiences an object, and that which cannot experience. Otherwise, we just learn about the story of these kinds of reality, but it's there even right now. Seeing, we talk about it. Hearing, we talk about it. When will it be object of right understanding? As we learned from the very beginning, what is there in life, in the world? So as long as there is no understanding of the nature of that, which now experiences an object all the time, arising and falling away, non-stop by conditions, there's no understanding which can get closer and closer to the truth of this moment. So we talk about the truth of this moment. It's so true and it should be known. What can be known now, this moment? The reality which experiences an object, and the object closer to the truth. When we talk about it, learn about it, to understand it, it's not far away at all.
It's never far away.
And this will be conditioned for a little more understanding of the higher level of understanding. Directly understand what is there now as it is, because of firm confidence of the truth of intellectual understanding about what is to be known, not just learn about it. So we talk about it again and again to have a little more understanding of it.
We can continue with this topic next week, because it's the only way that there can ever be the direct understanding now of the experiencing. And however much one talks about the different stories and situations, it will never bring one closer to understanding just what is appearing now, the experiencing and the reality experienced.
Yes,